What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of this is going to be a special episode of my rock review. And the reason why I say it's going to be a special episode because I'm about to review today. I've been talking about this for a couple of months now, and it is the artist formerly known as Prince with the Chaos and Disorder album. This was his 18th studio album. Excuse me. Okay, his 18th studio album in 1996. Yeah, man. Notice how I said the artist and shit like that. This was pretty much I want to say the tail end of the slave era and shit like that, which I'm gonna talk about that in a minute. Okay, so this was released in 1996 on Warner Brothers Records. This only single this album came out with was Dinner with Dolores. Okay, so yeah, man. So I told you guys I'm gonna talk about the latter 99 post 96 Prince albums and shit like that slowly but surely. And this is gonna be the beginning because yeah, I've been trying to take my time to review this album for a while now, and so what better time than today to do it? Okay, so the last album he had released before it was the Gold Experience, which I felt like was pretty solid album and shit. Okay, so the story with this album was the fact that the songs was recorded from according to my sources um between like 93, 94, and shit like that. And he was majority songs recorded around this time and shit. And originally, like I mentioned before, he was supposed to have done the Gold Experience in 1994, but like this whole album was recorded around the time and he was going through like the whole Contract Masters feud with Warner Brothers Records and stuff like that. And so a lot of the songs was kind of like him going after Warner Brothers and talking about his masters, getting his masters back and shit like that. And it's kind of crazy too because since this was the last album that was supposed to have been on the Warner Brothers label, he did not like really tour for this album, did not promote for this album. You can tell like a lot of songs were kind of like, how can I put this? They were kind of like either half-assed or rushed in a few ways and shit like that. So yeah, man. Cause I gotta be real. When I first heard this album, I did not like it. To be real with you, but I kind of re-listened to it over the past couple of months, and stay tuned for my results on this. That's all I'm gonna say right now. And here's the thing. Here's the thing about this album, though, that I kind of found a little interesting was that like in '94, according to my sources, he was trying to release this. I think it was this project called The Undertaker or some shit like that, where it was like a more like a rock infused kind of thingamajig and shit. But with the Warner Brothers trying to like rush release and tell them what kind of music they wanted to do with him, because Warner Brothers, they wanted Prince to do the whole dance kind of thing and shit like that. They to pretty much, in my opinion, like you can tell like once Prince started doing like Sign of the Times and shit, the cracks was really beginning to show with his relationship with Warner Brothers and stuff like that. So that's one thing I've kind of peeped game on and shit like that. So yeah, and it's kind of crazy because like fast forward to 1995, and that's when Paisley Park, they did a press release talking about how, and I quote, the artist had officially given notice to Warner Bros. Records of his desire to terminate his recording agreement with the company. Dot dot dot. The artist appeared to deliver the 3 remaining albums under the former name Prince, which will fulfill the contractual to Warner Bros. Records. Currently, the albums are titled Prince the Vault Volume 1, 2, and 3, which they would end up releasing the Vault album officially in 1999, which I'm gonna talk about that some other day. The artist will release a new recording entitled Emancipation once he is free from all ties with Time Warner, unquote. And which Emancipation came out later on this year and shit like that, which I'm gonna talk about that at the end of the review and shit. And so yeah, so with that being said, he still had a couple of band members like, Rosie Gaines kind of returned on this album to do a couple of tracks and shit, the background vocals. He had, his people like who else? Michael B and Sonny T appeared on a couple of tracks and shit like that. So yeah, man, like pretty much kept it in house in a way. And he also had a couple of uncredited rappers too, like this rapper that goes by the name of, hold on, let me see his name, Scrap D and Stepper Ranks, some rappers from Minneapolis and shit. So yeah, that's one thing I kind of peeped game on that. Alright, so this album was pretty much in the shelves until '96. And if you see the album cover right here, it was pretty much like if you look closely, you'll see like the fucking footprint right there. It looks like a Smash Prince record and shit. I kind of felt that was pretty interesting and whatnot. Alright. Yeah, very interesting, Got like the whole toilet and shit like that, Got the Bible and shit. Kind of very eerie, kind of dark and shit, you know what I'm saying? Alright, and just to let you guys know, I'm going to like read down like the personnel in this album and shit, because additional performers he had was Kirk Johnson, Rosie Gaines, the NPG Horns, Michael Nelson, Steve Strand, Brian Gallagher, Kathy and Dave Johnson, Scrap D, Stepper Ranks, Michael Mack, and of course the artists and shit. Alright. And so also, if you guys looking on the line of notes right here, says some shit like, if you read it, originally intended for private use only, this compilation serves as the last original material recorded by artists for Warner Bros. Records. May you too see the day. May you live to see the dawn and shit. Because, yep, he just fulfills his contract with that. Alright, and I done enough rambling for once and shit. So, 11 songs, not too long, not too short. You guys know what I'm about to do. Track number 1, we got is Chaos and Disorder. Pretty rocking track right here. With this track, he kind of took on an alliance as like a no-name reporter and shit. And, he kind of had like a few jabs towards like Warner Brothers. Kind of had a few jabs towards Warner Brothers and whatnot. Yeah, man. Not one of my favorite tracks, but, conceptual-wise, it was pretty standard and shit. Track number 2, I Like It There. Not a fan of this track, really. Not really a fan of this track right here. I Like It There. Just like one of them sex songs. Well, I don't know if it's really a sex song, because it could have had, like, a meaning behind it. But, yeah. I could have done without that. Track number 3, Dinner with Dolores. Very interesting song. This was a single, but it could mean 2 different meanings and shit like that. Because, for one thing, Dinner with Dolores is talking about how Prince goes out with this girl named, quote-unquote, Dolores. And so, he kind of got turned out because, she ate a lot, and then basically, she was so wrapped around about sex and shit, you know what I'm saying? And the reason why it was a pretty interesting track, because of the fact that the track Dolores could mean 2 different reasons from what I looked up. For one, Dolores could be like a metaphor to Warner Brothers, if you want to think towards like the album concept. Warner Brothers wanted, Prince to do the same thing and shit like that. They didn't want him to do all this experimentation. Like, there's like a lot of stories when it comes to like that relationship, especially towards like the latter post Sign of the Times, Black Album, whatnot, and shit like that. And so, 2, this one is kind of the most interesting story I read, was the fact that Prince wrote the song about Madonna. And you guys should know, if you guys, know that they used to work together, they used to date and shit like that, and so they went on a date, because, they went on a date, I think, and shit like that, and maybe Because if you listen to some of his lyrics, I see, well, like, has lyrics like, and by the stroke of midnight, she wanted some more and more, showing dirty movies like some kind of whore. But she was wasting her time because there wasn't a line that would make me come around her door and shit. And there's also this fucking line too, which I kind of found interesting. Her bells just are broken since 1984. Dancing like a white girl on disco dirty floors. Because around that time too, Madonna had dropped, what was the album? Like a version album, if I'm not, like a version and shit like that, the post disco. I kind of interesting too. So, and then there was like this interview that Madonna did for the LA Times in 1994, which, quote, I'm saying, quote, I had dinner with Prince once and he was just sipping tea very daintily. I was stuffing food down my face and I was like, aren't you going to eat? Unquote. Actually, no, I can scratch that. She mimics a delicate whisper, no. And I thought, oh my God. I have the story about people who don't eat. They know me. It's something about being in control. So, yeah, kind of interesting, like that. And it wouldn't really surprise me that he probably would wrote that for Madonna, but who knows and shit. And other than that, Dinner with Dolores, nice guitar track. I like the guitar on that track too and shit. Video is pretty dope too. You can like the little European setting on that video. Very cool track. Track number 4, The Same December. I could care less about the song. The beat was dope and shit. I kind of felt like, with The Same December, it's kind of like a metaphor, like the same thing over and over and shit. Yeah, that's one thing I got from that. Next track, Right the Wrong. Right the Wrong is the next track and shit. Very dope track. Very, very, very dope track. Probably one of his more political songs, to say the least, because he's talking about, like, the mistreatment of, minorities, like with Indian women, and then, with black men and shit like that. Yeah, man, something kind of different from Prince and shit. Well, not specifically too different, but it kind of stood out to me and shit. One thing I liked about that. Track number 6, Xanily. Okay. So this song, in a weird way, is growing on me. It's kind of like a 90s version of Darling Nikki in a weird way. And bear with me when I say this, because it tells a story about him, how he hooks up with this chick. He hooks up with this chick named Xanily and shit like that, and who had a sister named Fendi or whatever. And so they double teamed on Prince to have a fucking threesome. Took him to a fucking place and shit. And then next you know it, the cops busted in and stuff like that. And then next you know it, the cops was watching them have a threesome and masturbating it to it. Vintage Prince, to say the least. Kind of definitely has that Darling Nikki kind of phase towards it and shit. Yeah, man, it's growing on me. It's not my favorite, but it's growing on me. I'll give it that. Next track, I Rock, Therefore I Am, featuring Scrappy D and Stepper Banks. Probably my favorite track off this album. It kind of was a song I would say was a precursor to what he was going to do. Well, let me not say that, because they kind of threw the song in a way can be seen. It could be seen as a precursor to Emancipation in a weird way and stuff. I kind of felt like this song should have been more towards the latter part of the album and shit. But yeah, very cool song. I Rock, Therefore I Am. Just talking about self-esteem and shit. How he's looking for a brighter future amidst this whole beef with Warner Brothers and stuff. This song has everything. It has soul, funk, has a little hip hop breakdown and shit like that. Very dope. Very, very good track. I like the line when he says, that's that shit. It is the same kids you compliment, the same ones that you were meant to rob an education from, in a private school as opposed to one that yearly spits out another group of fools into a system that's destined to fail. Like, he was just going in, like I said. And that's why I said it kind of can be seen as a precursor to emancipation and shit like that, because emancipation was talking about freedom of speech, talking about like freedom of expression themselves and stuff like that. So yeah, that's a very interesting track right there. I rock Therefore I Am. Next track, Into the Light, featuring that song has background vocals from Rosie Gaines. Man, Rosie Gaines is a very dope singer. I wish she would have definitely been on some more stuff post Diamonds and Pearls, in my personal opinion, but other than that, this is probably one of the most spiritual songs off this album. Kind of talks about reincarnation, and it was influenced by Betty Eadie's self-help book Embraced by the Light, where like in that book she talked about how she had like a near-death experience according to my sources, and kind of coincides with Prince because reincarnation, how he reinformed himself as, of course, the artist, or that symbol and shit. So that's one thing I got from Into the Light. Next track, I Will. Yeah, it kind of makes sense how this song was right next to Into the Light and shit like that, because I will basically talking about I will fight the fight, like how it says in the verse, I will fight this fight, I will sleep tonight. How he's not gonna let the bullshit disrupt him. He's gonna keep moving forward with his music and shit. Yeah, man, very dope song. I always love when Prince and Rosie, like post the revolution, him and Rosie. I always like when him and Rosie Gaines, they get together and stuff like that. That's one thing I've always liked about the New Power Generation era. And re-listening to the album, I never would have thought that they would have still been working together at this point. Like, then we get to Dig You Better Dead. Yes, a very, very kind of eerie, dark kind of track and shit. But, and I'm explaining because he's again going after Warner Brothers and whatnot. And so one thing about the song, there was the first verse. From what I looked up, it could be inferred that it was talking about how he wanted to independently release The Most Beautiful Girl in the World, because like I mentioned before, that song was released in '94 and stuff. And so he had lines like, a long time ago you took 6 months of walking, talking on the other side, what started as an experiment turned into a heaven sent message that saved your ass from dying and shit. Yeah, very goes in on that track. And then Cora said, in life there's always peaks and valleys, and if you're lost, they won't show you the way. That same somebody said, I dig you better dead, but I'd much rather see if your God is what you say. And that's a very, very true line too, because if you really, like, after Prince died in 2016, a lot more of his fans started paying attention more to his 90s, like his latter period and shit. And when I mean his latter period, I mean post the Love Symbol album, like post the Warner Brothers and shit album. Because look at what's happening today. Like, they're over here re-releasing all of his albums, like the Rave Unto album in '99. They re-released. They're actually going to re-release this album too. Pretty much, they re-released the Musicology album, which I showed you guys. I have the vinyl of that album and stuff. And yeah, man, which I like. Yeah, it's cool and everything and shit like that. And people are actually paying attention to him more and stuff. It's like, where was all this attention when he was alive and stuff, And so, yeah, man, it's a very, very interesting track. Dig You Better Dead. And the last track, Had You, probably my second favorite song off this album and shit. Very interesting track because it's like a short song, and I kind of found it interesting because the first album he dropped was called For You, and the last song is called Had You. I like what he did with that shit, and it's a very short track, but I'm going to just read some shit. Like, he says some lines like, called you, found you, begged you, convinced you, saw you, held you, and then so on. The last couple of tracks, had hurt you, disappointed you, fuck you, had you. Like, I like the way he did that shit, in my opinion. So yeah, that's very dope track. Had You. Okay. So I'm gonna tell you guys, when I first heard this album, I was not a fan. And this was after the time I heard this album, I think before he died too. So, and this was after the time, I read about it and how they threw on songs like this all together. And yeah, man, like the way, one thing about the song album that really caught my attention was the way he was singing on a couple of tracks. Like with the rock tone of this album, he was trying to have like a very raspy tone with his voice, which was very okay, but it kind of caught me off guard in certain tracks. Um, yeah, man. Also, I kind of felt like the mixing at the time when I first heard it was, I kind of felt like the mixing was a little bit, but now listening to this album, it's not as bad as I thought it was, because in a weird way, it's very different. He tried to go for like a lot more rock, darker edge with his album and shit like that. Yeah, man. And despite like it's not really an official album, like as so, ugh. It's not as an official album because Warner Bros just threw some shit together. Prince had no input on it. Like a lot of the stuff he was doing like around this time too. I did feel that maybe I was hard on a couple of tracks on this album, but overall, it's not an album I would say was among my favorites, in my opinion. But with that being said, you have to be a very, very, very big Prince fan to really appreciate this album. And I say that because when it comes to like a lot of Prince fans and shit, especially a lot of Prince fans from the Prince.org forum and stuff like that, they always want to say how, his 80s discography was amazing. Like, fuck everything that came after. Like, fuck everything that fucking came after and shit like that. And let me just say this. Let me just say this because, yes, when it comes to Prince, my favorite years from Prince, I would say 1979, 1980, up to, I want to say 1992, 93, maybe up to when he did like the Love Symbol album and shit. And then after, I would say, Love Symbol album, it kind of, you can say it gets hit or miss. Because even like towards the latter of the Warner Brothers run, I would say like maybe he was kind of like going hit or miss and shit. Like, because you guys know it took me a while to really appreciate Love Sexy and stuff like that. It really took me a while to appreciate Love Sexy. So yeah, so I've heard everything. I've heard pretty much everything from Prince, and so I can say what I have to say. And you know what I'm saying? So it has been recently confirmed that they're also going to re-release or reissue this album, because this album and Emancipation on vinyl for the first time, because this album has been long out of print for years. Well, of course, the latter Prince albums, a lot of his albums have been long out of print, but this one, yeah, you couldn't really find this album a lot. I got this from, I think, Amazon. I actually got this from Amazon. It's not expensive. It's not too expensive compared to like the Rainbow Children, compared to maybe Musicology and shit like that. But yeah, I think I got it for maybe about $8-9, I think. So this is the artist formerly known as Prince with Chaos and Disorder. And I didn't mean to do that, but just in case you guys don't even know, few announcements I want to make. Starting next month, I'm definitely going to review this album and shit. And I'm not going to review all of the album all at once, because that's going to take all night. But for every Sunday in September, or every Sunday in September right now, as of now, I'm going to dedicate each disc on this album and stuff like that. Each disc dedicated for one Sunday, basically. But however, the last Sunday of September, I will personally pick all of the songs that I feel like would have been made the perfect album for Emancipation. So this is gonna be a very different review, whatnot. So, and yes, I've heard the whole album, done my notes on it. So I got some shit to say. I got some good and I got some bad to say. That's all I'm gonna say. And just a little few announcements I'm gonna make. I want to also give a shout out to Speak Your Clout, because they have done a CE updates collection video this past, I want to say Friday, yesterday, and I'm gonna have my collection video because I've been late. I'm gonna show my collection Monday night. I want to say 10:30. Also, Sunday, I'm going to talk about Craig G's The Kingpin album. So stay tuned on that. And I also have a live review on, Slim Shady LP. I'm going to talk about this Wednesday. I have 2 days off, so I know I've been a little late with some YouTube videos lately. So, yeah, man, I'm just going to enjoy my day off and shit like that. And once, school happens next week and shit like that, just trying to relax a lot this week. So, that being said, this is your boy Reg here. Make sure y'all click that subscribe button, send that like, share this video for all our Prince fans and stuff like that. Peace.